I'm speaking as a, somebody who actually right now is in the process of being a partner, hopefully, in a 100-room hotel or 120-room hotel with no TSAs asked for. And I might add that my accountant to say I'm putting the land into it at $1 million less than it's worth.
But your question, Ed, is...
My question is, how about the Fane Tower each?
Oh, good. I'm sure they'd love to talk about it. 'Cause they
What's the
don't hear
Fane Tower?
enough from me. Who would you like to go at that first?
Really?
Okay, Anthony.
I'll go first.
All
this time.
right.
So Fane Tower, no.
My bad.
Okay, we'll start off with that. It's a no, all right? Was it a hard no from me from the beginning? No, it wasn't a hard no. I wanted to hear about it. I wanted to learn about it. There were some things about it that I wasn't feeling secure about. Not necessarily the height or the design for me. I couldn't get an answer on how much it was going to cost to live in the Fane Tower. When I couldn't get that answer, couldn't get the answer of who are you going to get to live in the Fane Tower. So when I couldn't get those two answers, I started to say, this is probably not something or someone that I want to deal with if I can't get these answers. The biggest turnoff to me, unfortunately on that was, when it was said by whoever the gentleman, and we all know who they are, I don't like to disparage anyone, if they don't like it, look the other way. That was the end for me. The if you don't like it, look in the other direction type thing didn't happen. What I don't want to happen when we discuss Fane Tower is to send a message to anyone who doesn't live down here, who doesn't feel what we feel and understand why we feel the way we do, that we are closed to development and business. I don't want people to feel that if they don't do exactly what we say, how we say, when we say, we will make it so difficult on you that you won't want to come here and develop. So that's the message I don't want to send, and that's the one I want to focus on, making sure that with other development, they know clearly what the residents and the neighbors want, but that we do want you here. We just want to make sure you can answer the questions that we're asking. You're coming, have an answer, even if we don't like the answer. Oh, sorry, this way.
So Ed, thank you for telling us about your project there really quickly. I do want to say about TSAs that I believe they should be standardized. Even if you're not applying for it, the system should be standard so that you don't have developers feeling that there's a political game to be had, that you have to know somebody in Providence to get something built or get something done, and that it's out in the open and for public consumption. On the Fane Tower, boy oh boy. FP&A and our sisters have been working against Fane for quite some time. I've been critical of Fane for several years. I remain critical. There's plenty of people that have a more intelligent and interesting opinion about the architecture, about the design. I think it's ugly and out of place, but I spent my energy opining about two particular different things. On the record, by the way, at places like Ordinance Committee, Downtown Design Review Committee, CPC, anybody who would listen, sometimes in person, sometimes written, sometimes both. What nobody of any authority has been able to clarify on the record, and of any substance, is what the precedent is going to mean for when one developer is allowed to deviate from the comprehensive plan by that scale. So it's not just a little relief on this dimension or in that dimension or something like that to make something work for some reason. I mean, it's many times the height, for example. And I came at it from this particular, it's more of a, I suppose, a legal question. If the commission or any of what used to be the purview of the city zoning and city council, if they allow it to happen, what's the city's options when a future developer asks for the same thing or something quite a bit less than Fane got? Can the city then be just to say no? I don't think so. A city board, commissioner, agency, etc., cannot arbitrarily treat one person one way and another person another way. So they might think they can do that, and maybe that might be the end result of a particular meeting. But if the courts get involved, and believe they will, for $200 or $300 million, it could be a completely different story. They could say, hey, you guys You guys set this precedent, you gave it up, you threw the comprehensive plan out by doing that. So I'm serious, nobody has been able to answer that question. The mayor wasn't, representatives of the House of Representatives couldn't answer it, City Council, no one wanted to. Maybe you can see why. So I was very concerned about that. The second thing I was concerned about is the economics of it. We don't want this thing to be partially built, only to find out the developer ran out of money, and then we have this skeleton-looking abomination. The whole thing was done in a completely opaque manner, and I'm sorry, but when you're asking for public support on a public-owned property, you do not get to be opaque about it.
John?
It's a definitive no. And that's because community members don't agree with it. And we have to, again, take a very nuanced approach to this. We know that it's not economically viable. And then also, we have to think about enforcing fair, inclusionary zoning practices. And to some of my competitors' points here, these laws are codified and they're on the books, but we're amending these laws, and that's going to have dire long-term implications on our city. So we have to think about what that's going to look like. But the bigger question here is affordable housing. We should be thinking about luxury condo units. We should be thinking about how we're going to provide affordable housing for our city. And when we think about encouraging economic development, what I heard here was that we should give out standardized TSAs. Quite frankly, we have to study that issue. We can't simply make a stance on whether or not standardized TSAs is the way to go. Because in fact, if you look at our competitors, they're all across the board. And unless we look at models in different marketplaces across the country to determine what's best for this particular market, we are going to do our city a huge disservice. I mean, ultimately it's all interconnected. When we think about taxpayer dollars, we're thinking about things like TSAs, we're thinking about affordable housing. And unless we critically analyze the property tax system and the inequities in our system, working with economists, working with tax and data experts, and not just, making definitive decisions without properly vetted data and community input, that can be really problematic. We've got to study these issues in a very nuanced way and properly vet the short and long-term implications of some of these tax policy changes.
Okay, John. Brett, please.
Okay, sure. And then I think ultimately what it requires is how do we enforce and apply fair, inclusionary, and equitable zoning practices? Look, this can't afford on-the-job training. I've studied this issue, and I've studied it in depth. I'm happy to share with each and every one of you the report that I've done on this issue. It connects to property taxes. 02903 and 02906, by the way, is taking on roughly around over 44% of the tax burden when you think about owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied residencies. Now, we can't just say we don't want to help our neighbors across the aisle, because we do want to do that. But we've got to look at exemptions. We've got to look at how we can help those who are elderly on a fixed income. We've got to look at TSAs and the impact that they have on our city. We've got to look at how we can raise more municipal revenue that we can put back into our public schools. This is going to take a very nuanced approach, and we have to be really thoughtful and methodical and look at the data and also talk to community members about where we intend to go moving forward.
Thanks, John.